Gold just did something strange. After one of the wildest years in its history, the price has essentially stalled, moving sideways while traders wait for the next signal. On the surface, that looks like calm. But 3,000 miles away in the silver market, something very different just happened, and it happened fast. In a single trading session, silver ripped more than 4% higher, slicing through resistance levels that had held for weeks. When one precious metal goes quiet and the other one screams, that's not a coincidence you can ignore. That's a signal. And once you understand what silver is actually reacting to, you start to realize that gold's pause might not be the calm before nothing. It might be the calm before something. Here's why this matters to you. Whether you own a single ounce of either metal or none at all, gold and silver aren't just trading symbols on a screen. They're a real-time readout of what large, sophisticated money believes is happening to the value of the dollar in your pocket, the interest rate on your mortgage, and the safety of the retirement account you've spent decades building. When these two metals start disagreeing with each other, it usually means something underneath the surface of the economy is shifting before it shows up in the headlines you'll read next month. And if you're the kind of person who wants to understand money, investing, gold, silver, and how to protect what you've built before the crowd catches on, that's exactly what we do here at Money Insiders. So go ahead and subscribe. And like this video, because we're about to walk through exactly what triggered this split and why the obvious explanation isn't the full story. Let's start with what actually happened this past week, because the sequence matters. Coming into early August, gold was trading in the neighborhood of $4,000 an ounce, still up an extraordinary amount for the year, but noticeably below the record peak it set back in January, when it briefly touched somewhere near $5,600 an ounce. Silver had followed a similar arc, spiking above $120 in January before crashing hard, losing roughly a third of its value in just a few weeks. So by the start of August, both metals were in what you could call a recovery phase, climbing back from steep corrections, but doing it cautiously. Then came a weekend of genuine relief. Reports emerged that the United States had paused a planned military strike on Iran, pursuing instead a diplomatic path to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices tumbled more than $4 a barrel almost immediately. Now, you might think falling oil is unrelated to gold and silver, but this is where the story gets more interesting than the headlines suggested. Cheaper oil doesn't just save you money at the pump. It cools the entire inflation picture because energy costs ripple through everything from shipping to manufacturing to the price of a bag of groceries. And when inflation expectations cool, the market immediately starts recalculating what the Federal Reserve is likely to do next. That single mechanism, oil prices to inflation expectations to Fed policy bets, is the thread connecting a ceasefire in the Middle East to the price of the ring on your finger or the coin in your safe. So early in the week, gold and silver both eased slightly as that war premium drained out of the market. That's the part almost every financial outlet reported. What most of them missed is the deeper mechanism running underneath it, and we'll come back to that. But here's where the real turning point happened, and it's the moment that gives this whole story its urgency. On Friday, a fresh jobs report landed, and it caught almost everyone off guard. Hiring came in weaker than expected. Now, before we go further, let's make sure that actually means something to you, because jobs report can sound like background noise if you're not a professional trader. When the government releases employment data and the numbers disappoint, it tells investors that the labor market, the engine that pays wages, funds mortgages, and keeps consumer spending alive, may be losing momentum faster than policymakers have been admitting publicly. That has a direct chain reaction. A softer labor market makes it far less likely the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates, and it increases the odds that rate cuts could arrive sooner than expected. Here's why that chain reaction sends gold and silver in different directions depending on the details. And it's worth slowing down on this, because this is the crack in the story that most viewers never get explained clearly. When interest rates fall, or are expected to fall, it becomes less attractive to leave your money parked in something like a savings account or a treasury bond earning interest, because that interest rate itself is shrinking. Gold and silver don't pay any interest at all, they just sit there. So when the return on cash and bonds drops, the opportunity cost of holding gold and silver drops too, and both metals typically become more attractive. That's the basic mechanic. But it doesn't explain why silver moved so much harder than gold on Friday. And that's the detail that actually deserves your full attention. Silver rallied on that jobs report by more than 4% in a single session, pushing to its highest level in roughly 6 weeks, while gold moved up a much smaller amount, essentially holding steady near its recent range. On the surface, that looks like silver simply being more volatile, which, to be fair, it often is. Silver has historically moved with more force in both directions than gold, because it's a smaller market with a lot less money in it, which means the same dollar of buying or selling pressure moves the needle further. But there's a second explanation sitting right underneath that one, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Silver isn't just a monetary metal that investors hoard the way they hoard gold. More than half of all the silver used in the world every year goes into industrial applications: solar panels, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, data center wiring, high-speed electronics, medical devices. Gold, by contrast, barely gets touched by industry. Almost all of gold's demand comes from investors, jewelry buyers, and central banks. That difference means silver is sensitive to two completely different stories at the same time: the safe haven, hedge against uncertainty story that also drives gold, and the industrial growth story that's tied to how healthy the broader economy actually is. When silver jumps on a weak jobs report, it's not behaving purely like a hedge. In some ways, it's behaving like a bet that the economy is heading toward looser monetary policy that could eventually stimulate industrial activity, layered right on top of the traditional safe haven bid. Gold, more purely a fear and reserve asset, doesn't carry that same dual identity, which is one reason its reaction was smaller and steadier. Now here's a number that puts all of this in a frame you can actually track for yourself going forward, because it's the single cleanest way to see the divergence in the title of this video. It's called the gold-silver ratio, and it simply tells you how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold at current prices. As of early August, that ratio had climbed to somewhere around 69 to 1. Compare that to the 50-year historical average, which sits closer to 65 to 1, and you can see that silver has been trading unusually cheap relative to gold for months. Then, after Friday's job shock, that ratio compressed sharply down toward the high 60s, as silver's rally outpaced gold's. That compression is the numeric fingerprint of exactly what the title of this video is describing. Gold barely moved. Silver moved hard enough to visibly shift the relationship between the two metals in a single day. But this is where the story deserves a reality check, because it would be easy to walk away from that number and assume it's a guaranteed signal that silver is about to explode higher and close the entire gap. It isn't guaranteed, and treating it that way would be irresponsible. Historically, a wide gold-silver ratio has sometimes preceded periods where silver catches up to gold, because traders view silver as relatively undervalued and rotate money into it. But the ratio has also stayed elevated for long stretches before, sometimes for years, without any dramatic reversion. Markets don't owe you a clean pattern just because a chart looks compelling. What the ratio tells you, responsibly, is that there's a real and measurable divergence happening right now between how gold and silver are being priced relative to their own history, not a certainty about what happens next. So if this were only about one jobs report and one ratio, it might be a short-term trading story and nothing more. But there's a second, much larger current running underneath this entire narrative, and it has almost nothing to do with Friday's headlines. It's been building for months, and once you understand it, gold's so-called pause starts to look a lot less passive. At the end of July, the Federal Reserve held its benchmark interest rate steady in a range of 3.5% to 3.75%. On its own, that's a routine outcome, exactly what most economists expected. But look closer at the vote itself, because this is the detail that deserves attention and rarely gets explained on the news. 3 regional Federal Reserve presidents didn't just vote to hold rates, they dissented, formally voting instead for an immediate rate hike. 3 hawkish dissents at a single meeting is an unusually strong signal of internal disagreement, the kind of split inside the Fed that hasn't been this pronounced in roughly a decade. What that tells you, in plain English, is that even the people setting interest rate policy for the entire country are not in agreement about whether inflation has actually been tamed. Some of them are worried enough that they wanted to raise borrowing costs again, right as other voices, and now the labor market data itself are pointing toward the opposite direction. That's not a stable, unified policy path. That's a Federal Reserve actively wrestling with a decision that could reshape mortgage rates, credit card interest, and the return on your savings account over the next year. And it hasn't resolved that argument yet. That unresolved tension is a big part of why gold has been consolidating rather than collapsing. When professional investors aren't sure whether interest rates are heading up or down, gold tends to trade in a holding pattern, because higher rates would normally weigh on gold, while economic uncertainty and a divided central bank support it. The pause isn't gold running out of reasons to move, it's gold sitting in the eye of a genuine disagreement among the people who set the price of money itself. Now, here's the part of the story that most casual viewers completely overlook, and it's arguably more important than anything happening in the futures market this week, while traders have been reacting to jobs data and interest rate speculation day by day. The world's central banks have been doing something remarkably consistent in the background, and it hasn't been subtle. According to the World Gold Council, central banks purchased roughly 289 tons of gold in the second quarter of this year alone. That's not just a large number, it's a record for that quarter. And it happened while gold prices were posting their steepest quarterly decline in years. Read that again, because it's the contradiction that deserves a closer look. Prices were falling, and the world's central banks were buying more aggressively than ever. Why does that matter to someone watching this video who has never bought a bar of gold in their life? Because central banks don't trade the way short-term investors do. A hedge fund buys and sells based on next week's headlines. A central bank is managing a national reserve, thinking in years and decades, not days. When the World Gold Council surveyed 76 central banks this year, 89% said they expect global gold reserves to keep rising over the next 12 months, and a record 45% said they personally plan to add to their own institutions' holdings, the highest share in the 9-year history of that survey. The People's Bank of China has now added to its gold reserves for 20 consecutive months. Poland has been one of the most aggressive buyers in the world, explicitly citing security concerns tied to its location on NATO's eastern border. And according to the World Gold Council, gold recently surpassed U.S. Treasuries to become the largest reserve asset held by central banks globally, a milestone that would have sounded almost unthinkable a decade ago. Here's the connection back to the title of this video, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. Central banks buying record amounts of gold, even as the price fell, is not a short-term trading signal, and it's not proof of anything guaranteed about where prices go next. It's a structural signal. It tells you that a growing number of the world's most conservative, risk-averse financial institutions are treating gold less like a speculative asset and more like insurance against a world where currencies, geopolitical alliances, and financial sanctions have all become less predictable than they used to be. Some analysts point directly to the freezing of roughly $300 billion of Russian foreign exchange reserves back in 2022 as the moment that changed this calculus. That event demonstrated to every central bank watching that reserves held in another country's currency can be frozen by a political decision. Gold sitting in a nation's own vault cannot be frozen the same way. Whether or not you find that reasoning compelling for your own decisions, it's the reasoning multiple central banks have cited publicly. And it helps explain a buying pattern that has now averaged roughly 1,000 tons a year for 4 straight years, double the average from the decade before. So gold's pause starts to look less like hesitation and more like consolidation with a floor underneath it, built by buyers who aren't reacting to a single jobs report. But if that's true for gold, you'd expect silver, gold's sister metal, to be riding the same wave of confidence. And this is exactly where the story takes its sharpest turn, because silver's fundamental picture right now is genuinely strange, in a way that deserves real explanation rather than a passing mention. According to the Silver Institute's most recent World Silver Survey, the global silver market is on track for its 6th consecutive annual supply deficit, with the shortfall for this year projected at roughly 46 million ounces, wider than last year's gap. 6 years in a row of demand outpacing supply is not a minor statistic. It means the market has been drawing down above-ground stockpiles, the silver sitting in vaults and warehouses left over from decades past, just to keep up with what the world is consuming every year. That's the kind of slow-moving structural pressure that doesn't show up in a single day's headline, but tends to matter enormously over time. Here's the detail that should genuinely surprise you, because it contradicts the story you'd expect to hear. You'd assume that a widening silver deficit means industrial demand is surging out of control. It's actually the opposite happening in one of silver's biggest use cases. Solar panel manufacturers, facing high silver costs and thin profit margins, have been aggressively engineering silver out of their products, a process the industry calls thrifting. According to the Silver Institute, silver demand from the solar sector is expected to fall by roughly 19% this year alone. That's a massive pullback from one of silver's largest industrial buyers. And yet, the overall deficit is getting wider, not narrower. How does that happen? Because mine production, the actual supply side of the equation, is shrinking even faster than industrial demand is falling, and because a completely different kind of buyer has stepped in to fill the gap. Everyday retail investors and institutions purchasing physical coins, bars, and silver-backed investment products, alongside steady growth in less publicized industrial categories like artificial intelligence, data center wiring, high-speed transmission equipment, and automotive electronics. So even as one major demand source shrinks, the deficit widens anyway, because the supply side is deteriorating and financial buying is absorbing whatever industry leaves behind. That's the overlooked relationship most casual coverage skips entirely. And it's a big part of why silver has room to be more volatile than gold in either direction. Now, layer that structural deficit back onto Friday's jobs-driven rally, and the picture becomes clearer. Silver isn't just reacting to one data point. It's a market with genuinely tight physical supply, a widening multi-year deficit, growing investment demand, and a price that's still historically cheap relative to gold by the ratio we talked about earlier, all colliding with a sudden shift in interest rate expectations. When a market with those characteristics gets a fresh catalyst, like a weak jobs report, the reaction tends to be sharper and faster than it would be in a market with abundant, easy supply. That's a meaningful part of why silver screamed while gold merely nodded. But before this starts to sound like a guaranteed story with an obvious happy ending, it's important to pull back and look at the other side of the ledger honestly, because that's the difference between real financial education and hype. Silver's history this year is a case study in how fast this metal can move against you as easily as for you. After peaking above $121 an ounce in late January, silver didn't just pull back, it collapsed by roughly a third of its value in a matter of weeks. That kind of swing can wipe out gains just as quickly as it creates them. And anyone drawn into silver purely because of a single strong week needs to understand that volatility cuts in both directions. Gold, for its part, remains meaningfully below its own January peak, and technical analysts point out that its broader trend since that peak has actually looked bearish, with price trading below its own moving averages for months. Some analysts believe a further pullback toward the $3,900 to $3,500 zone is possible if current support levels fail to hold, while others, including forecasts from major institutions, point toward a resumption of the longer-term uptrend later in the year if the Federal Reserve moves toward cutting rates. Both of those are legitimate, professionally supported views right now, and no one, including us, can tell you with certainty which one plays out. That uncertainty isn't a flaw in the story, it's the story. It's exactly why gold is pausing instead of racing in either direction. Zoom out far enough, and you can see why August itself tends to behave this way. Historically, this month has often served as a seasonal transition period for precious metals, a pause before markets typically reposition heading into the final quarter of the year. Some analysts describe 2026's pattern so far as an unusually precise echo of that historical seasonal script. Gold consolidating through late summer before the next directional move, whatever that move turns out to be, becomes clearer closer to autumn. That's a historical pattern, not a promise, but it does help explain why a pause in gold right now isn't necessarily unusual, even against the backdrop of everything else happening underneath it. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insiders and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next. This video is AI generated,